Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Game Over Vancouver following a massive Canucks W. 3 wins in a row for your Vancouver Canucks. That's the first 3-game win streak since the first week of November, which that stat in and of itself not necessarily great, but 3 games in a row. Nice to see the Canucks stringing things together amidst the incredible off-ice turmoil, some of the most drama I've remembered seeing as a Canucks fan in my time. But managed to hold on through this game. Linus Karlsson getting his first NHL goal off a beautiful pass. Best passer from our defensive core, Tyler Myers, which was incredible to see for him. And overall, Thatcher Demko managed to hold down between the pipes in a game where the Canucks forgot how to play offense for a period and a half. But overall, the Canucks got a win. It was nice to see. This team needed it. Now, after that win, officially back into a playoff spot as we have leapfrogged the Calgary Flames for that last wildcard spot. And we're back in a final playoff position. So overall, that was the 2-1 victory for your Vancouver, or 3-1 counting the empty netter for your Vancouver Canucks. I am joined by the one and only Lachlan Irvin, Lock in the Crease, writer for Canucks Army, among many other talents. Lachlan, what were your thoughts of the game?
I mean, this is a big night for Thatcher Demko. He comes out with one of his best performances of the season. We got a first NHL goal from Linus Karlsson. I mean, the fact that the Canucks are on a 3-game winning streak. Yeah, it's Nashville, who has not looked particularly good this year. But hey, they beat the Predators beat the Canucks the last 2 meetings in Vancouver. So hey, this is improvement. This is legitimate, honest to goodness improvement for the Canucks.
No, it sure is, and not to discredit the Nashville Predators, they were 7-3 in their last 10 heading into this. So they were a pretty hot team, and I thought that they played pretty well. I thought that it was a game where if you asked the two teams at the start of the season what their expectations were, this was a game that in a vacuum felt like it lived up to those expectations. I could imagine the really good Vancouver Canucks playing the really good Nashville Predators and it looking like that instead of course, the Nashville Predators season having gone like it's gone. Thatcher Demko, I'll admit I was worried after the first period. I didn't necessarily love the goal. Obviously not Demko's fault. It's a rebound that gets bashed home. But it was a kind of lack of effort in that rebound. There was a couple other saves where I thought he looked shaky. And boy, did he shut my inner monologue up. Because after that, he was perfect. And he had to make some great saves. I will say, was assisted by his best friends a little bit. I think Nashville hit both a post and a crossbar in the third. And the Canucks offense really started to dry up. But it did start hot. Looking back to that first goal, the celebration from Höglander, you could tell how happy he was to have genuinely gotten back onto the score sheet there for the Canucks, which was really nice to see for him, of course, really having struggled actually scoring this year.
Yeah, Höglander has had again, like it's not been for lack of try with Nils Höglander. Like the amount of times he has shot the puck or had a chance that should have gone in the net just not go in was crazy. So now he's getting some bounces finally. Like that's great for him. And it got the Canucks off on the right foot for sure.
Yeah, and it was a good way to start. And I think that the Canucks overall played a pretty good game in the first. I mean, 13 shots at the end of the first period. If the Canucks had sustained that, is a pretty nice pace throughout 60 minutes. Getting 36 shots a night would be nice, and I thought that they did a good job of peppering Saros with some pretty genuinely good chances. I mean, Saros had a crazy save early in the first off that bounce in front. And yeah, the first period offensively was, I think, what a lot of people, including myself, have wanted to see from the Canucks, where it felt like they were playing with confidence, felt like they were winning a lot of battles, and felt like their passes were genuinely dangerous and had chances of getting through. Looking over to the second, great job by Tyler Myers on that pass. Incredible pass by Myers. He threads it throughout 2 Nashville sticks for Linus Karlsson's first game. It was great to see for Karlsson. He's got 12 goals in 18 games down in the AHL, so to see him finally get one in the NHL, first career goal for him, that was great to see, and really a hard-working goal. I mean, obviously not super skilled, but wins a battle to the side of the net, gets a tap home. So good job for Karlsson, and again, what a game for Tyler Myers, who has quietly looked really good for the Canucks the last few nights. I thought he had a couple tough shifts in the third, but overall tonight in the last few games, I've really liked Tyler Myers' play.
Yeah, full disclosure to everybody everybody watching or listening to this at home. There was a brief period where I couldn't hear Zach because I accidentally shut off the volume somehow on Discord, and I had
I
to
could tell by
quickly
the
shuffle
frantic
over.
look in your eyes.
Yeah, But from what I did hear, yes. With Tyler Myers, I mean, listen, you're a superstar in the NHL level. You get unfairly blamed for a cross check on a guy who was clearly trying to get your goat a little bit there, as real heroes tend to have happen to them. An unfair 3-game suspension. No, in all seriousness, weirdly, he has come back and looked very good since that suspension. And it's only been 2 games for him, but he's looked much steadier. I really do like him on a pair with Quinn Hughes. I genuinely think and it's, again, anybody can play with Quinn Hughes theoretically, but I think that when you have Myers playing up with Hughes, it frees up other defensemen to play and run their own deep pairings a little bit more. And I think Myers fits a lot better in that spot, and I think he's better off for it. And I think in a way he almost looks like he needs less help in himself when he's playing with Quinn Hughes, and I think that actually has really benefited him. And yeah, for Linus Karlsson, I mean, God, talk about a long road to that first NHL goal for him. Such a long road that his teammates didn't notice that that they were supposed to grab the first NHL goal puck for him. I do have some theories on that. We can talk about that if you want, but yeah, that was a little bit of a funny moment that none of them noticed that they needed to grab the puck for him.
Yeah, you wonder if it's an indirect compliment. No way, this is your first NHL goal. We didn't know.
So I have a couple theories. So I've seen a lot of people who already, because I posted the video of the ref kind of trying to give the puck to Huglander and Pettersson, and none of them picking up on it. I have theories. My theory is, watching the replay back, people are already blaming Pettersson for not knowing. Because that seems to be
It's all his fault.
in vogue thing to do, is when in doubt, just blame Pettersson for
If you make $11.6 million, you better pick up pucks. Duh.
Yeah, no. So here's the thing. Watching back that replay, I don't think he was looking. I don't think I don't think he sees the puck in the ref's hand. You see him looking in the ref's direction, but I don't think he's looking at his hand, so I don't think he sees that the ref has it. The other thing that's key is that the 2 players who you don't see are on that clip are Myers and Hughes, who are the more likely players to know that to pick up the puck. Particularly Myers is the player who I think in most cases would know who hasn't scored their first NHL goal yet and why they need to grab the puck, because that is usually the veteran guys. The veteran guy is the one keeping track of that stuff. And you don't see them in the play. They're the last to the line. They're the last to the celebration, last to the bench. I think what happens here is a bit of a miscommunication where I think one of Hughes or Myers, if not both, while the ref has the puck already, is looking for it in the crease. And by the time it's getting back to the penalty box with it, I think they're kind of figuring out, oh, the ref has it, we'll have to go get it on the next shift. Like I think that was a miscommunication before anybody jumps to this team isn't care. This is a culture problem. I think that was miscommunication, because the ref doesn't seem to say, hey, here's the puck either.
Blow it all up. This team hates each other. There's no chemistry. I heard they tried to fight Linus Karlsson after he scored.
You would be surprised at how many people were kind of jumping to similar conclusions.
I saw some
not
tweets.
Ironically, in the comments on that video, I'm like, okay, there's worse offenses than this. I really don't think that was on purpose.
Yeah, okay, quickly, before we get to the rest of the game where the Canucks got the victory, I should say this period 1 of Game Over Vancouver is sponsored by Hyperdrive Hockey. Check out the flagship show of the Game Over Network right here on the Game Over Network channel. Hyperdrive Hockey, all things hockey across various leagues in multiple countries, whatever it is and wherever it is. Max, Stephanie, and Kev have you covered with a steady dose of fun fan engagement. You can find Hyperdrive Hockey on the Game Over Network YouTube channel or wherever you find your podcasts, or on the Hyperdrive Hockey page at thegameovernetwork.com. Getting back to it, the Canucks offense, right after that Linus Karlsson goal, said, you know what? We're done. And I think that is something that we have seen, and I wonder, is it kind of it must be a coaching thing, because we've seen it with such regularity
1,000,
throughout this game that the Canucks,
1,000%.
the Canucks have a tendency to turtle. They have a tendency to say,
They,
we've got a lead, now let's pray to God we can keep this. Let's give up on shooting. I mean, how many shots? I think they had 4 shots in the second period, from 13 in the first.
According to NHL.com, which isn't always accurate, but right now it appears to be, they had 3 in the second and 6 in the third.
I gave them too much credit.
This is 1,000%. If you've watched any Rick Tocchet coach team, park the bus is absolutely part of the game plan. It's this idea of, you don't have the defense, so everybody's got to sit back and kind of help the defense do their job once they've grabbed a lead. And it's so not interesting to watch. Admittedly, it's the least interesting kind of hockey to watch. This is 1,000% what they're coaching the team to do. I do not think a team with, like, for all the arrows that have gone towards, like, Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, any one of the forwards on that roster, I think to assume that they are purposely not attacking in the second and third is silly. That's not their style. They're a team that wants to play more aggressively, but clearly they're being coached to sit back. And it won them a game tonight. It won them a game in some other game, and it won them a lot of games last year. But when you're struggling for offense as much as the Canucks are, and you're a team that needs more confidence offensively, I think you got to be more aggressive than that. Like that, you can't sit on those 2-1 games like that. It's too close to do that. And objectively, it's not fun to watch that kind of hockey really either. And some teams have won with it in the past, but again, I would much prefer to see them playing a little bit more high flying.
Yeah, especially because it doesn't feel like they're giving up a ton of defensive chances when they are playing offensively. Like when they're turtling, most of the chances that I've written down on my notes here were from when the Canucks were turtling, because simply if you're playing defense 90% of the time, even if you're playing somewhat better defense, you're going to give up a larger volume of chances, and thus by proxy, eventually more grade A chances as well. And so I thought that the first period, I mean, obviously, tough goal against. I did think it was a really bad pinch by Susie on that goal where it goes up to try and get a puck along the boards. Just doesn't get it 2-on-1. Then they score on the rebound. But still overall, it's not like the Canucks are playing unreal defensive hockey in the second and third. So it's so not worth the lack of offense. And it's frustrating because I've spent a large portion of the year defending Tocchet. But as the year goes along, you do start to wonder how much of this situation is on the players and is on the relationships within the locker room, but how much of it is a Tocchet thing. Because I think some of the things you can point to, say Pettersson struggling, the offense drying up, some of that does, I think, have to do with the known relationship struggles and dynamics within the locker room. But a lot of it has to do with coaching as well. Just the way that they struggle for shots. I can't tell you after tonight's game, but I can tell you, as of last game, Canucks were 6th last in shots for in the league. And this just does feel very unsustainable. Tonight, you got a great performance by Thatcher Demko, but you really can't rely on it.
Last year.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the issue.
Against this exact same team. The Canucks, there's a difference between coaching to win and coaching not to lose. And that's kind of what the Canucks have been doing, is playing not to lose. And it's going to cost them in the long run. If you have to play like you're a team that's confident that any goal you might give up, you can get back at the other end. And in those playoffs in particular, watching those games, and granted, they won a series against Nashville playing this way, and they nearly beat Edmonton playing this way. But watching those playoffs, the thing that really stuck out to me was they didn't dominate a single game in those playoffs like they had during the regular season last year. There were games that they were far and away, head over heels, the best team. They wouldn't take their foot off the gas, and they'd win these games by like 5 or 6 goals. And then you get to the playoffs, and they're suddenly really playing stingy, and they're really playing not to give up the lead they've picked up. And I think that hampered them in the long run. I think that gassed them quicker over the course of that playoff run. And I think you look at this team now, they're playing the same kind of style where I think it's affecting them. I think part of the reason, you look back at like all the games they've blown late in the third period, I think it's for things like not pushing forward, not pushing on what got you that lead in the first place.
No, 100%, and it does feel unsustainable having to rely on strong goaltending as part of your team's identity. Because the thing is when that happens, on nights when you even just get average goaltending performances, the whole team suffers because of it. And I loved what I saw from Demko tonight, but I'm still not certain that we'll be able to see that at a consistent level all season. I really hope we can, and I really hope we do, but he has not looked great coming back. Interesting stat before this game, he was second last in adjusted save percentage, or adjusted goals against rather, in the league, only ahead of Philip Grubauer, who got sent down to the AHL today. So in terms of the goals you're expecting your goaltender to save, he's last now because Grubauer's down in the AHL. Great game tonight. Tonight was a bounce-back performance. It felt like vintage Demko where, oh no, our team has made yet another mistake, yet he's there to bail us out. And I will say, mistakes were made. Was it in the third period? Yes, it was, where JT Miller completely biffs a pass at the blue line. Preds get a rush, they hit the crossbar, then they take a penalty, and right away, on the power play, JT Miller messes up and gives up a shorthanded breakaway, and Thatcher Demko bails them out. So there was some really brutal defense being played, and Thatcher Demko still stood in his head. Sammy Baines saying, great game by Demko, I doubted him. I'm right with you there, Sammy. As we were saying before the game, I also was doubting Demko. I was saying we've seen him so many games in a row, and he hasn't been able to show us what's going to be different about tonight. And tonight was a different kind of Thatcher Demko. Tonight really felt like prime Demmer.
Yeah, even the crossbar one, I will note, I believe it hits his shoulder before it hits the crossbar. So I think I believe he directs that into the crossbar, and that's a save you can chalk up to him, I believe, as well. Demko looked much better. The thing with, again, I have all the time in the world for Demko when it comes to the fact that he is dealing with the Popliteus injury. I think that is got to be such a hard thing to deal with as a goaltender and frankly as a person in general. Just this idea that you can't necessarily move your body or trust your body in the same way you could before. Like even if it goes back to 100% healthy, there's always going to be that question mark in your head, right? And I think and so much of this with Demko is things where you can tell he's being a little cautious. He's being a little careful. He's not necessarily moving with the same force and the same confidence that he used to. And I think, and as much as it's cost them in a few games here and there, I also completely understand why that would be the case. That's a tough thing to deal with. So the fact that we're kind of seeing him get a little closer now, game over game, is bodes well for him. And again, because he's a very talented goaltender. There have been goalies before that have changed their style or been forced to change their style midway through their career because of an injury or for whatever reason. And it doesn't always pan out, but sometimes if a goaltender is skilled enough, it can. With Demko, yeah, you're still seeing some uncharacteristic mistakes or reads from him that just are things that he will hopefully get better at with time.
Yeah.
But as far as for right now goes, like you can see he's making improvements and he's getting better game after game.
No, absolutely he is, and I do think Kevin Lankinen has given you some really respectable starts as well, and that's why I do honestly believe in the Canucks' chances at still making it to the playoffs, and we'll discuss that a little bit more in period 2 here, but just to finally kind of wrap up the game, Canucks did manage to park the bus. Say what you will about the strategy. As you mentioned, Lachlan, it did work tonight. They hang on. Forsberg takes a funny goalie interference penalty where he just tries to take a shortcut through the crease, jumps on top of Thatcher Demko's back. Yeah, that's a penalty. And then the Canucks score on the empty net. Power play goal for Pius Suter onto an empty net for the 3-1 final win. And just before we head to period 2, taking some questions from the chat here. Did anyone notice the missed high sticks tonight? Bunch of them brutal officiating. Yeah, I have it written down in my rest. This was not a banner game, or my notes, not a banner game for the referees. There was a couple missed high stickings that were pretty obvious. And Vancouver came out the worst. But again, that almost is a good thing for Vancouver. Came out the worst end of the penalties, and we're still able to come out on top with a victory. I will say both teams' power plays were brutal tonight. Although maybe it was just good penalty killing, whichever one you want to chalk it up to. Special teams, not a huge factor.
Yeah, they didn't have to necessarily be in this game. There just wasn't a lot of penalties at all. And frankly, that was huge for the Canucks because the last 2 times they played Nashville, I think the power play Nashville's power play buried them. So it really helped. And that's also another thing with the Demko start as well. I have to imagine that the reason they started Demko in this game is because they didn't want to put Lankinen in against his former team, considering they clearly were picking corners, knowing where to shoot on him. So I think it makes sense that Demko went tonight. A lot of people were questioning it. I thought it made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
They came out unscathed in that regard for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, Alfred, as you pointed out, we are now back in wildcard 2 spot. So I am going to take us to the second period now, and of course, second period of Game Over Vancouver, sponsored by our crowdfunding efforts. We have a link to our Patreon down below. We are just now setting up starting to enact on some great tiers of rewards for people that are able to support us financially. And if you aren't able to support us financially, a like, subscribe, a comment, anything and everything helps us out here growing at Game Over Vancouver, and we really appreciate all the support. So looking now to the Canucks' future. Playoffs, still a realistic opportunity for the Canucks. Wildcard 2 is currently where we are standing. It could go either way. Calgary refuses to die. Dustin Wolf really helping them out. There's a couple other teams. But that being said, with the amount of skill on this Canucks roster, even with how much has gone wrong this year, I still kind of expect them to be a playoff team.
That's the hilarious part of this year, is that with everything that's gone wrong, they literally, if they can just string a few good wins together, yeah, they're probably going to make the playoffs. And that's not, and I wouldn't even say, and I will say, I don't know how much of that is just because the Canucks have the talent to get there, or if just how bad the rest of the Western Conference is behind them. Like, you look at the teams that are there, and you're like, every single one of them, you're like, oh yeah, that team's not going anywhere. It really is just Calgary and Vancouver.
Oh no,
fighting
St.
for that
Louis
last
and
spot.
Utah. Don't catch us, St. Louis and Utah.
Yeah, no, 2 teams who are technically close, but no, they aren't. Like, there's no chance either of those teams are getting in. So it really is just a fight of Calgary and Vancouver, of who wants to lose to Winnipeg more in the first round. It really, although that being said, the Canucks could, because of how top heavy the Pacific is, they could even jump over LA, who is also really nosediving right now. So there's still a chance you could get that third spot in the Pacific. Although, do you want to play Vegas? So it really is a toss up on what death you would like a little bit.
Yeah, I'll say this. I would rather face Winnipeg than Vegas.
Wrong.
Yeah? Yeah?
Oh, absolutely wrong. The Canucks cannot beat Winnipeg and haven't been able to for like 8 years. They cannot beat the Jets.
That's fair. I just think they're a bit of a paper tiger.
Them every time.
Yeah.
The Jets might be a paper tiger, except when they're playing the Canucks. Genuinely.
And they're a real tiger.
Legitimately, like, I kind of make this like joke sometimes, or like this comparison. It's a bit of a flimsy argument, but I always some teams, like, there's a bit of a rock paper scissors element where it's like rock might
I get it, yeah,
but scissors beats paper.
Yeah.
And the Jets are one of those teams where no matter where the Canucks are at over the last little while, Winnipeg always has their number for whatever reason. Even last year, they cooked them every time. So if I'm the Canucks, I don't want anything to do with Winnipeg. Any other team but them, I think they have a better shot of beating.
I honestly, that argument makes a lot of sense to me. I do think Vegas is the better overall team. I think Vegas will go deeper than Winnipeg, but I can't argue with that logic. It does just seem like Winnipeg wins every time. For me, and I've said it all year, is I think they're the Maple Leafs of the West. I think they choke every year in the playoffs. I don't think it's quite as bad as Toronto, but that Eastern Conference or Western Conference final run for Winnipeg was 7 years ago now. It's been a while since they've done anything in the postseason.
I will say I like the Canucks odds against, like, if they played a Dallas or a Minnesota or a Colorado somehow, like if someone else snuck into that top spot in the Central, I kind of like a few of their odds here and there. Because like if they can avoid Winnipeg and somehow end up playing the Central Division teams, I do actually like their chances against a couple of those other teams specifically, just because, again, in the same way that Winnipeg always beats the Canucks seem to do really well against like Colorado for some reason over the last few years. And Dallas and Minnesota, it's a bit closer, but even then, sometimes there have been games where it's just like, oh, they could beat this team, even though they shouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
They kind of have a good shot against them.
Yeah, no, 100%. So if we're talking playoff picture, Sammy Baines with a good question here is, do you sell off the pending UFAs if this team is in a playoff spot at the deadline? Because, of course, the whole conversation around this team has been that Jim Rutherford, the president of hockey operations, has come out and said this core cannot work. But if you're in a playoff position, do you want to get rid of those players that are going to make you better in a playoff push? And, of course, Besser and Suter are the pending UFAs. There's some I'd want to keep more than others. But what would you do with the very precarious situation the Canucks are in right now in terms of selling and buying players?
I would not trade Besser. I would not trade Besser, even if you don't have him under a contract before the deadline, simply because I think that's a player that you're not gonna. It's not like you're gonna get an improving player for Besser in that regard, and I think you have to assume he's your play. You have to treat him like he's your playoff rental at the very least. Like you're not gonna get a better player on at the trade deadline for Besser if you're in a playoff spot. If you're out of a playoff spot, that's a different question. Suter, that's a tough one because he's been really good. He's so good. I frankly would like to see the Canucks keep Suter if they longer term, if they can, for not too much money. Because he's a really good piece for your bottom six. I like what he brings defensively as well as putting a lot of pucks in the net. I would say no. I would say no, you shouldn't trade any pending UFAs if you're in a playoff spot. Again, that math might change if they're in a different place. I don't know what you think though.
I agree with keeping Suter. I think the versatility of that kind of player, there's very few that can play wing and center interchangeably genuinely at a good level, and he is one of those players. As you said, he's responsible defensively and he can score. I really like Suter. I think he's a mini Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in terms of player style. Obviously, I do think RNH has a lot more upside scoring-wise, but their versatility and what they bring. Besser, that's a tough one. It really depends whether or not you think he's going to re-sign and whether you think re-signing him is a good idea. Because I think if he's not going to re-sign, I get what you mean about the rental, but your team should only be taking rentals if you think you've got an actual chance at the Cup. And I just don't know if I think this team has an actual chance at the Cup if we're in the second wildcard spot at the trade deadline. And then if your team doesn't have a great chance at the Cup, Besser could fetch you a pretty decent return, even just as a rental for another team.
But what kind of like return would you get on a Besser as a playoff rental? Because I honestly don't know what kind of value you might get out of a trade deadline trade for Besser that you couldn't get in the off season already. Like again, the key of trading at like the trade deadline, if you're making a trade, you're gonna get him at a premium price or like at a premium, like how much it's gonna cost to get Besser would from the Canucks would cost more at the trade deadline. But I honestly don't know how much higher that cost would genuinely be for him as a rental and if it's really all that enticing compared to just waiting until the off season or like closer to June to get something done at like the draft or something.
So you're saying flip Besser's rights at the draft for a pick then?
Yeah.
I just think that you do have that significantly added value of the rental when you're trading someone. I feel like, getting a first would be much better than getting a second or something like that. I think you're more likely to get a bit more of a price if you trade him at the trade deadline to a team that thinks they can re-sign him, i.e. like maybe a trade and sign agreement like we've seen in the past. That's, again, if you think that you can't re-sign him or if you think re-signing him is a bad idea. I would like to see them get something fairly... You're right that you're not going to get just a straight player swap. If you're renting him to another playoff team, they're not going to give you a competitive player for that. But you could get a high round draft pick that you then could flip at the next trade deadline or whenever to try and get a player that does upgrade your team. I do get what you mean about keeping him for a rental because the Canucks aren't going to get anything better by buying at the deadline. I just think that this is a team that, I don't know, we'll see how this next little bit of the season goes. But right now, I mean, can you honestly see this team having playoff success?
It's so contingent on them being able to sort out everything else and being able to fix the defense, because that's the thing at the trade deadline. If they're going to make moves, it's like, okay, can you fix that defense? Because yeah, I'm sorry, you can't go into a playoff series with Noah Juleson playing every game. You're screwed if you want to go through that. So if that's a guy who's making it into your lineup regularly, like, you're not ready for a real playoff run in any sort of way. So it's really tough because, again, if you also have to keep in mind what the messaging is to the team itself. So if you're in a playoff spot, let's say they build some momentum here. Let's say they jump into that third spot in the Pacific. They're not a division winner. They're not necessarily even a guaranteed pass team that's going to pass into the second round. But if you trade Besser at that point, what does that tell the rest of the team that you have? Like, that tells them that you have no faith in them to do anything, and that's going to only start bringing things back down to into the abyss a little bit. So you have to kind of also factor that into your decision making if you're Rutherford and Alvin, as well as what kind of message are you sending to the rest of your players if you start trading guys away. It's one thing if they're out of the playoffs, that's on them, right? But if you're in the playoff race and then start selling off anyway, that's going to be tough to sell to your players.
But here's the thing. We've already seen that. I mean, again, Rutherford's article in the Globe, or this past Monday, where he just comes out and says, this core isn't going to work. I think that we've seen this management be out front, be honest, and just say, hey, this isn't working already. And so I don't think that, I mean, yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. A trade would send that message, but they've been sending that message to this team.
But trading JT Miller with term is different than trading Brock Besser as a UFA, who could have been your playoff rental when you're in the third spot in the Pacific. Like, that's a different kind of trade. You're not trading Miller just for futures. You're trading him for a player who's coming back, even if it is a player who's not necessarily at the same level.
At the same caliber. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I wouldn't be too worried about the message sending side of it, and just more so worried about the overall value, because people bring up a great point that Quinn Hughes has 2 years left on this contract, and the number one thing has to be being competitive enough for him to re-sign. He said he does not want to be part of a rebuild. Fair enough. So this team has to remain competitive throughout it. And if you're going to make a Brock Besser trade, I want to maximize the value. And so for me, maximizing the value would trump keeping him for the playoffs and going on a playoff run this year. Just because, again, second round exit last year, and I think the team's made significant steps backwards this year. I mean, just looking at the defensive core, as you said, if Juleson's making it into your lineup every night, you are not a serious contender. Same with Vincent Desharnais. I'm going to be real with you. There are several players on this team. The Canucks have a lot of seventh defensemen that play very, very regular minutes. And you know what they say, defense wins championships. So it's tough. Overall, I mean, I think I would like to keep Besser. So much of this is contingent on what happens with the Miller Pettersson thing. So why don't we move on to the third period and get to some rampant speculation? Not enough rampant speculation in the Canucks media, especially right now. So let's add to that by talking.
An air horn.
Yeah, absolutely. By talking about Miller Pettersson drama, the latest on it, what's been going on with this team off ice, especially. So the thing that I referenced earlier is Rutherford came out on Monday and did an article for the Globe Mail where he says, this team's core is not going to work. Miller and Pettersson can't get along. It is just not going to work out. So he did mention that there is definitely a chance that they will both still be Canucks come the offseason because he wants to get the maximum value in a trade and he doesn't want to do anything too reactive. So understandable. I like that bit. But also, your president of hockey operations coming out and saying, hey, these guys hate each other and it literally can't work. isn't gonna increase their value anymore, guys. We are already looking at a dangerously low return here for JT Miller. Or for Pettersson. They mentioned that they would prefer to trade JT Miller, but that they're still taking calls on both. This is going to be one of the biggest trades in Canucks history, and I am so scared because I don't think it's an exaggeration to say there is a world where they mess this up so badly that it directly leads to Hughes leaving and us going into a rebuild.
Oh, 1,000%. I think that's unfortunately almost a likelier scenario depending on who they trade. I think I will say, so with the Jim Rutherford quotes, like admitting that there's issues in the locker room and stuff, not to defend him so much as like kind of just to be a little fair, the rest of the league already knows that. It's not like him coming out and publicly admitting it was for anyone other than the fans, really. The rest of the league already knew that was a thing. It's a little bit vindicating to see him admit it in terms of, seeing people, like a bunch of people always saying, oh, the media just made all this up. It's like, no, this is a very
been a
real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's been a thing for a while. So it was a little bit like, okay, now do you kind of see that this was real the whole time? I think I mean, I'll say this, like, I think a lot of this has to do more with giving the players almost a little bit of a kick in the pants as well. Like, I don't think, again, because the rest of the league already knows what's going on, it wasn't going to change their trade value all that much. I think if anything, it's just more of a message, another message sent to the players of, hey, if you don't get it together, we'll ship people off. And, to a credit like a guy like Pettersson, he looked good tonight. He had a good game. Miller had some hiccups, but ended up with I believe a point or two. This is this was more of a message sent to the players. Was it necessarily the best way to send a message to the players? Who's to say? Was it necessarily something new? Probably not. I feel like they've done this kind of thing before already this year with Alvin a couple times. It's a bit of a weird time, to say the least, especially coming off of 2 wins and now they're on to number 3.
Yeah, I know. It's so awful because, again, if you just somehow lived in a bubble where you hadn't heard about any of this drama, you'd be pretty positive right now. Hey, Canucks back into a playoff spot, 3-game win streak, bright future on our hands. How is Jonathan Lekkerimäki? I heard he was injured. I don't think we've gotten an official evaluation yet, but Patrick Alvin did say that it was nothing serious after a brief evaluation, so at least not seriously injured. You'd hate to see that for Lekkerimäki. I've really liked him getting called up to the lineup. I'd like to see him again. I'm not sure exactly what the Canucks would get in a Brock Besser trade. I might be a little optimistic. I feel like they could get a first, given Besser's history, and if they were willing to retain on a pending UFA. If you retain 50%, you don't think so? Besser what does he make right now?
For a first, with the way the Canucks have played this year, maybe last year.
40 goal scorer last year, though. And he was great in the playoffs, too.
He was great in the playoff, for sure. First I don't know how many.
If you retain half, it's 3.3 for Brock Besser. I guess if it's a trade and sign, maybe, because that does provide more value than
sign and trade. Level. Yeah, that's different. I think for a straight rental, I think there's going to be other teams that have players who are going to fetch closer to a first. I don't know what the market's like, but
yeah, that's fair. That might be a sooner the time question.
If the Rantanen trade was any indication, the price is steep right now to get players of that caliber. Certainly.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll see what happens with Besser. I think a lot does depend on the Canucks next few months because, I mean, if this team goes on a crazy win streak and shoots up to third in the Pacific and looks genuinely good while doing it, I think that does change the story as opposed to if the Canucks narrowly sneak in a wild card position.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rutherford's interview is potentially a warning to prepare Canucks fans for the unexpected. I do like that comment, but I think Rutherford isn't a loose cannon. I agree that I think those comments were very calculated. I think we've seen in the past that he doesn't talk to media a whole lot, so when he does tend to really think out what he says. At least that's my take of it. I don't know if you see that differently. I think there's just been a lot of message sending this year, in a just a weird year where no fans or media really 100% know what's actually going on behind the scenes.
I mean, yeah, I think the Canucks have so much talent that they should be able to figure this out, or not. Like they have enough talent that they should be able to figure this stuff out if they really want to. Um, I think yeah, there's with the Rutherford comments were very very interesting. I don't I really don't know where this is going to end up going. It feels like the ship has sailed on a few of these guys. There was like I did see that there were some quotes that were left out of that article that I thought were like, well, like one of them including that, oh, we don't want to trade these guys was one of the quotes that was left out of the article, which changes a lot of the context of it as well. And it's like, well, that felt like something you probably should have kept in there. Um, and again, especially because again, if the whole point of if the whole point of what might happen down the line here is to keep Quinn Hughes on the team and build a team around Quinn Hughes, I really think, and again, I know this isn't always everyone's opinion, but I think there is little to no world where Quinn Hughes watches a guy like Elias Pettersson walk out the door for a player that's not of the same caliber, or at least that is not, on an underwhelming trade, and doesn't see that as a rebuild, as signaling a rebuild to him, right? Like the players know, like the
Yeah.
players know what that kind of stuff means. I really don't know if you look at the fact that this team started off a few years ago with Horvat, Besser, Pettersson, and Hughes, and then suddenly there's a situation where regardless of what happens with JT Miller, that Hughes would be the only one left out of that 8-year rebuild. I don't know how he couldn't look at that message as a message of, oh, this team's starting over. I don't want to be here for this, right? Because
Yeah.
I really think that you're going to have a hard time selling a Quinn Hughes, Pettersson trade to Quinn Hughes as anything other than, oh, we're tearing this apart.
Yeah, no, I do think that trading Miller makes a lot more sense, especially given his contract, given what just the rumors around the team are. Um, Trading Pettersson is your young cornerstone franchise player, or at least forward. And if you trade him, that does signal a lot of things. It also absolutely basically signifies that the ownership group is bad at their jobs. Because what do you mean you just signed the biggest contract in team history by a lot, and then 1 year later you have to move on from it? That would also just make me lose faith in the ownership group. And I think that they kind of know that. Whether Miller, the deal still also doesn't look great on them, but is a little bit less of an indictment, especially because of personality problems. I'm just worried with JT Miller what that return might even look like, given the lack of leverage now and the personality problems. I mean, we've been preparing for a small return, and I think it's just getting smaller by the day.
And that's kind of why you almost, with Miller in particular, it's a little bit more of, you got to bite the bullet at some point. Like you
Yeah.
got to pull the trigger at some point. Like it's never going to get bigger again is the main thing. Like it's not going to get any bigger again unless he goes on a ridiculous run to end the season.
Well, he's not even been
So,
playing badly, so there's only so much better he can be playing a lot
yeah,
of these nights.
he's older. Like he's getting older. He's played a lot of hard minutes. Like looking at the plays that the what he is playing, how he is playing, it looks like he's probably playing through something as well. He's probably not at 100% right now as well. And that's also not going to get better with time. So at some point you got to bite the bullet a little bit. With Pettersson, it's different in the sense that there is still absolutely time for him to figure that out, to figure out what the issues are. There are too many teams have given up on players in similar situations to Pettersson, and ended up looking very dumb down the line for doing so.
Yeah.
Whereas with Miller, again, I don't think he's going to magically come out of nowhere and go on again back-to-back 100 points, and you're going to be like, "Ah, geez, we shouldn't have traded him." I don't think the odds of that are particularly high. So at some point, it's just like, get some players for him. I don't think you're gonna. It's still not going to be the easiest sell in the world to the players you've got, but it'll at least be something better for sure. And I think you can, at the very least, with the cap space that he would free up, it would be freed up by moving him, you could make quick fixes and make a lot of changes.
Yeah. No, you could. I think it is just going to be about how they retool for this team and what players they are able to bring back and keep as well. You are, of course, a noted goalie expert, so I'm going to ask you about the other goalie. We talked a lot about Demko tonight, but what, in your mind, is the importance of re-signing Kevin Lankinen? Because for me, I think Kevin Lankinen's brought so much for this team, and if they can get him at an even somewhat decent price, it makes a ton of sense to have a backup that can handle a pretty heavy workload for a backup, considering that Demko might need to have his games limited in terms of starting and have almost like a 1A, 1B. But I'd love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can get him on a good contract, there of course you want to keep him around. I mean, the prices, it depends on how well he does down the stretch. He might play himself out of their price range to a degree, like looking at a lot of the contracts that have been handed out to goalies of late. At least not so much like, not ignore it, putting aside like the Linus Allmarks and the Igor Shesterkins, or sorry, not Allmark, Jeremy Swayman contract.
Oh, Mark's kicked in
Those are
this year.
obviously those are obviously different contracts.
Yeah.
And like that's a different caliber within itself. But like who got signed literally just yesterday or the other day?
Logan Thompson.
For about 5 days. Logan Thompson, thank you.
Yep.
He's coming off of one, like, not necessarily he hasn't necessarily been bad in Vegas, but he's clearly coming off of in the middle of a very, very good year. And even with that, he's only getting around $5 million, which is a little bit over what I believe Thatcher Demko is currently making.
Yeah.
So, if you can get Lankinen under that number in like the 3, I mean 4 is even tough. Like 9 million devoted to your goaltending is a little tough. The cap's going to go up, but it depends on what other choices and decisions you're making. But yeah, if you can get him under Demko's number, then yeah, why not keep him around? He is the guy you should be trying to keep around because he's been so good. And yeah, you do need 2 goaltenders at the NHL level who can win you games nowadays. You can't rely on one guy anymore. It's going to be tough, but at some point that's a contract that you're definitely going to want to get done.
Yeah, absolutely. I've loved what Lankinen's brought. I think he's actually such a good goaltender. I do have my doubts about whether or not he could handle a full starting workload, but that's why, in my mind, he's a perfect 1B, is he is a backup that can give you incredible goaltending for a backup. And I think the Logan Thompson contract actually really helps out Vancouver because Logan Thompson's having an incredible year, putting together genuinely a Vezina caliber season over in Washington. I mean, say what you will about the defense. I think that he has a season that you could rival with Hellebuck's. I think he's been playing incredible over there, and I think he would be great for Canada and the Four Nations had he been one of their 3 named goaltenders. So tough for him.
Who are their goaltenders right now for Canada? It's not.
So Binnington is starting.
Binnington.
Then you've got Aiden Hill and Sam Montembeault.
Yeah, Logan Thompson should be in there. No sweat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, Joel Hofer I would have picked Joel Hofer over Binnington.
For me, the one that I question is Montembeault. And I mean no disrespect to Montembeault. I do like him. But what does he give you that you don't get from Binnington or Hill?
Well, I mean, okay, in a short tournament like this, the third string doesn't really matter, I will say. Like
it's the option.
Which is almost why I'm kind of like, with Montembeault, it does seem like maybe that they didn't necessarily pick him for being the best third option.
My thing is,
they just kind of
why pick a third stringer using that mentality, knowing that he's not going to play? Surely you just go with the guy that's got the highest potential upside and hope that they get hot at the time. Because as you said, it is all about just who's getting hot right now.
Because I think if you're getting, well, you'd have to look at who the front office is again. I don't remember who's in charge, but even if a goalie gets injured, I'm guessing they're allowed to pull someone in and be like, well, we have an injury, we're going to call in another guy. And that could be somebody else. Who jumps over Montembeault anyway. I'd have to double check on what the rules are for a tournament like this as well. I mean, Samuel Ersson is already coming in to replace Jacob Markstrom, who's injured for Sweden, but Ersson's obviously not going to be the one playing games now. It's going to be Gustafsson or I'm blanking on, is it Allmark? Allmark's the other guy. So it'll be Allmark or Gustafsson now, right? So yeah, the third string is a little bit more of a I don't want to say charity, but it's more of let's give a handout, like hand off a nice little like award to a guy who's done well this year kind of thing. With Thompson, I'll say I wonder if maybe the lefty thing has to do with it. That's been a goalies have been overlooked for less
Yeah.
than being left-handed. Speaking from experience. Yeah. Well, I think they'll. I do think there's a good chance they'll regret not taking a Logan Thompson here, though.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it's going to be really interesting seeing which other players pull out. I think Alex Pietrangelo pulling out for Team Canada sets a really interesting precedent. The NHL said that it's not going to impose any restrictions or force players to go, so we'll see which players kind of really want to go compete internationally, or whether we're going to see some more guys back out for health reasons for their own teams, because guys are going to prioritize being healthy and ready to go for the playoffs as opposed to this tournament. So I do wonder if we see any more people voluntarily step out like Pietrangelo.
Probably. I think again, this tournament is already such a hard sell. I think for a lot of people, just because it's kind of it really is the NHL going. This is kind of the World Cup of hockey, but also it isn't.
It's just a bit worse.
Yeah, it's what if we took the World Cup of hockey and made it just not as fun? Yeah, there's because they've already talked about. I believe the World Cup is coming back in 2028. I think was the year they said, because they're essentially going to go to the calendar they should have been on the whole time, which is go to the Olympics and then every second year is the World Cup. So they always play it would essentially go in February, Olympics, All-Star game, World Cup, All-Star game, Olympics, and its cycle continues, which is the way they should have been doing it this whole time. Yeah, so this year and they're clearly kind of trying to, unfortunately, I mean, not even unfortunately, just more like a bit weird. They're clearly trying to like wait for Russia to be allowed to compete in things again. Because otherwise I think this would have been a World Cup. I think this would have just been a normal World Cup if Russia was allowed to ice a team. So, yeah, this is a weird tournament, certainly. I completely understand players who are deciding like, yeah, I'm not gonna play in this silly little tournament. I'm just gonna the playoffs are more important. My contract is more important. In this particular case, I definitely get it. I think if this was the Olympics or something else, Petrangelo's probably playing.
4 nations facing off. Yeah, it is an interesting.
I've heard that too many times. I've heard that commercial so many times, especially considering he says it twice.
It's so funny. It's his only line. He says it twice.
Yeah. Yeah, man, we get it. 4 nations.
4 nations, not 5.
What are they doing? And what are they doing?
Facing off.
Good for them.
Yeah. I do really want to see Russia return to international play. I think that their team would be so interesting. I always like seeing Russia compete. Don't punish the players for international things, in my mind. But they aren't. So 4 Nations Cup. I'm still excited for 4 Nations Cup. I will say their literal only selling point is just like, hey, we haven't had best on best international hockey for so long. You want to come watch this? And it's going to work on me. I am going to watch all of it, and I'm going to be enthralled the whole time.
I mean, I like any kind of hockey I can get. I would rather listen. I'll take this over an All-Star game any day of the week. Like, this is
that's true.
Better than watching. Oh, let's watch them all play 3-on-3 for 60 minutes. That's
John Scott MVP. Yeah.
That was at least kind of fun.
That was back when the All-Star game was good. Back in my day when the All-Star game actually meant something.
Yeah, like that I actually thought was a rare moment where it was actually kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take this though over watching a silly 3-on-3 tournament any day. As much as they've tried to improve, it's an impossible task to make the All-Star game watchable. I mean, every league has the same issue, really.
Yeah.
That's not even just an NHL problem. Every team is running into the issue of, we want to make the All-Star game matter. It's like, you can't. It's not possible. You will never get that.
Back in my day, Phil Kessel was drafted last in the All-Star draft. Yeah, Alfred, I remember that one too. That was a good one.
I was weirdly watching All-Star game highlights recently just for fun for some reason. But like old ones from like the 90s and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not good hockey. It's just kind of interesting seeing them all skate out in the jersey of the year or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Utah just lost to Pittsburgh in overtime. Thank you, Pittsburgh. That helps us out indirectly, as Utah is one of the teams kind of trying to chase the Canucks right now.
Yeah, the Utah
What
Watachi.
was Wasatch, wasn't it?
Wasatch.
Wasatch? I think it was Wasatch.
Yeah,
Wasatch.
the Utah Wasatch.
The Utah Wasatch.
We had this conversation.
It's
earlier.
bad. The fact you did not even remember it from a conversation we had 5 hours ago. It's bad.
That is damning. That is pretty
bad.
damning. I'm not gonna lie. But listen, I'll take creative attempt was made any day over. Oh, we're the hockey club.
Yeah.
Great,
I don't like
great.
hockey club either. I'm with you. And I was having to defend that. A bunch of the soccer guys at the office were like, "Oh, hockey club's awesome." No, it is not. It sucks.
It's so boring. It's boring.
As a broadcaster too, when the hockey club scores, no.
And objectively, I'm sorry, Utah, you've had, 50 years to think of what are we going to name a pro sports team if we get one? Because you didn't have to with the Jazz. You just took that from New Orleans. You didn't have to think of anything new for that one. You're telling me you haven't come up with anything better in the last 50 years you've been waiting to name a team yourself? Come on.
And by the way, the Jazz,
Yeti
which makes so much more sense than in New Orleans than it does in Utah. Why the Utah Jazz?
Exactly. So, yeah, I'm sorry. The best you've been able to come up with in the last 50 years for a team was hockey club or we're the Diet Colorado Avalanche. Come on. All of these are names that I'm like, okay, this was something the Avalanche.
Oh, they're all terrible,
but didn't.
Yeah, they're all terrible.
None of them are good. None of them are good. Come on.
The options for those of you at home, they're deciding between the Utah Wasatch, the Utah Yeti, except they can't get the trademark for that because of a cup.
Yeti's not allowed.
Yeah, so that one's off the table. They're considering staying the Utah Hockey Club or being the Utah Mammoth. And I'm sorry, all of those are bad.
All of those are bad. I like Wasatch the best out of all of them simply because of the fact that it's different and I can see them being able to do it opens up enough room to do something creative with it as opposed to Mammoth or
HC
Hockey Club.
Yeah.
Or Hockey Club. Yeah. Wasatch, I can at least see a scenario where that's one of the names that I can see in the future being like, it was weird when we first heard it, but now I can't imagine them without it, kind of thing, right? I can see a world where that ends up working and sticking really well.
I definitely do get where you're coming from. I just think they should go back to the drawing board. I think that they got it wrong. I think that there's a million better names out there, such as the Stormin' Mormons.
I didn't even like Golden Knights when I heard Golden Knights. I'm like, that's weird. It's weird.
I didn't hate it because it's so stupid and over the top that I was like, oh, that's Las Vegas. It wouldn't work for anyone else, but dumb, goaty, body.
Yeah. I just thought it was weird that they weren't Las Vegas and that they were, instead of the Las Vegas Knights, they were the Vegas Golden Knights. But again, now it's been 6-7 years and I'm like, oh, I can't imagine them being called anything other than the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm on board with Wasatch, because I can see a world for sure where we end up all liking that name in the future.
My simple logic is just Golden Knights at least sounds cool. Wasatch, it doesn't sound good. I'm going to be so honest. I don't like it. But at the same time, it is probably the best.
Do you just not like it because it's new? Because that's kind of my thought process. That's what I was kind of thinking.
I don't think so, because I liked Golden Knights and I liked Seattle Kraken right off the bat for both of them.
Kraken was a great name from the beginning. Let's not kid ourselves here. Let's not.
Yeah, Wasatch is no Kraken.
Kraken was ever gonna. Well, Kraken, you know what? Yeah, but you know what a Kraken is. You know what a knight is. You know being golden.
Do you know what a Wasatch is?
No, and that's why I'm saying that I think that this is a name where it's weird to everyone because they've never heard this word before. Yeah. But if with time it would make sense to you.
It is funny
that, there have been names like that recently. I'm blanking on which ones would fall into that category, but it's like you're hearing it and you're like, "Oh, that's weird." But then once you get used to it, you're like, "Oh, this is a great name."
My thing with Wasatch is, in the NHL, there's no other team where I genuinely have no comprehension of the meaning behind it. Maybe, I guess, Red Wings, but again, that's an original legacy team kind of thing. For a new team...
like the Buffalo Sabres, the first thing you think of is probably a buffalo and instead of a sword, right? Do you think of the sword first? I think,
I think
especially
of them
when they
both
were
at the
the
same
goat head.
time. As well, especially because they've got both.
When they were the goat head, when they were wearing the goat head jerseys, there wasn't
I
even a
like that one
sword
because
on it.
I think you think of something different for the team name and the city. Whether Utah Wasatch is borderline the same thing, by the way, because Wasatch is a mountain range in Utah, which really does, in my mind, accurately represent just how little goes on in Utah. That they were like, all right, 50 years, come up with a sports team. What's the most interesting thing about our place?
Even the Jazz jerseys are mountains.
There's a mountain range, exactly. They were like, that is it.
We've got mountains here. It's like, yeah, so do all of us. In
yeah.
fact, we already have a team with a mountain on it.
I've
It's
seen a
called
mountain.
The Avalanche.
Yeah,
They're
which
called the Avalanche. We already
by
have
the way,
these guys.
talking about creative names, the Avalanche, when they were first relocated to Colorado, were going to be called the Rocky Mountain Extreme. What a stupid, but yet I kind of love it name.
That.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb, but I would love to see a one-time like throwback Rocky Mountain Extreme jersey. I'd love to see that.
Reverse retro of the Rocky Mountain Extreme. That would actually
that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be great. But yeah, thank God they avoided ever calling.
Yeah, that's
like,
over
you
the
really
top.
Want to date yourself? Like you really want to date yourself by putting a big X in the name? Like that's the most '90s thing ever. Like thank goodness they picked something.
It's the kind of thing Elon Musk thinks is cool.
Oh God, yeah, it really is. Jeez, they really avoided a disaster by being the. Imagine if they had won the cup in '96 with Joe Sakic in a Rocky Mountain Extreme jersey. What is an extreme exactly? Like there you go. You want to talk about what is something? What is an extreme? Yeah. There you go. I mean, because obviously they couldn't pick Rockies again because that was a baseball team by the time they got back.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, there you go.
Really helped save them.
There have been other names like that have been avoided. That have avoided total disaster for sure.
Yeah, thankfully. Anyways, we'll see what Utah does. We'll start to wrap up the show here. If you guys have any questions, get them in now to either myself, Lachlan, or both of us about the Canucks or any hockey in general. We talk everything from junior hockey to international hockey. Four Nations coming up soon. But just before we go to questions and end the show, let's take a look at the upcoming schedule here for the Canucks. So next game's going to be against the Stars, then we got the Red Wings and the Avs, and then the Sharks, Leafs, Golden Knights. So some tough games coming up here, but looking to the next one, Stars in 2 days. Firstly, do you ride Demko for yet another game, or do you put Lankinen back in? I would say they probably steer Lankinen now, just because you've gone Demko so many games in a row. And secondly, what do you expect to see from the Stars, which of course are on paper one of the better teams in the West, although I do, for some reason, like the Canucks against the Stars.
I think Dallas is, Dallas, I believe Miro Heiskanen left a game tonight with an injury. I think that's a thing that they're going to have to look out for now. I think that I think it's a closer matchup. I think a lot of it will depend on how well Jake Ottinger's playing for sure. The Stars are one of those teams that I can't really place at any point, just in terms of like they have so many good players, but they also aren't necessarily like setting the world on fire at any point. Even in last year in the playoffs, I was kind of like, I don't know if they're what their ceiling really is. I think right now they're obviously on paper a much better team than the Canucks have been. But I think it's gonna depend on if the Canucks momentum carries them through here a little bit.
Yeah, they will need to ride the momentum, ride the lightning, and we'll see how they do against the Dallas Stars. Would be nice to string together some wins here. I think a win streak could shut out a fair amount of the noise surrounding the team. I don't know that we'll fully stop hearing it, because I think especially now this front office seemingly has kind of made a decision that long-term, Petey and Miller aren't going to work. But it seems like unless they can find a really suitable trade partner in the regular season, there's a good chance we'll see them wait until the offseason. So because of that, you got to tough it out till the end of the season, and you got to do your best. So, let's see what they can get done in the playoffs, if we can make the playoffs. But a win streak right now of just, 2 or 3 more wins in a row would really, really start to right the ship for this team and be able to build a little bit of a lead on the other teams in the West, because did leapfrog Calgary, and behind Calgary, there's a bit of a gap. Blues are at 50 points, Canucks now 56. The Utah Storm and Mormons were also at 49. So I think if the Canucks can kind of pull away from the Flames a little bit, they'll really start to cement themselves in that last spot.
Yep, they got it. They got it. Their fate is in their own hands, really.
That's a terrifying thought.
It is. The entire world is on your shoulders, and it's like Ant-Man. They're in it tough for sure, but again, I mean there's worse places to be than having your own fate in your hands, really, being at the mercy of everybody else. Like, try and get a run here. If you want to quiet the noise, best way to do that is winning. Winning solves everything.
Winning does solve everything. So with that, move on to period 4. Don't see any questions right now, so we may just continue to move on here. Just in terms of lineup notes that I might want to see moving forward, I just don't want to see Noah Juulsen anymore. I'm sorry. I'm sure he's a nice guy, a good local boy. He's big. I'm trying to think of nice things. Seriously, I mean, again, if you look at the game stat after that, second last, only ahead of Carson Soucy. Gets lit every time he's on the ice. And there's so many defensemen that this franchise has in their possession that are better than him. He's their 8th, maybe their 9th best defenseman. He shouldn't be seeing the ice. I'm sorry because I know it's mean, but if you want this team to be somewhat good this year, and you're not tanking, so you do want them to be good, because those are your options, you never want to be in the middle, then I'd like to see some other defensemen starting to get a shot again. I know he's small. I like Eric Brandstrom, but even if you don't want to put out Eric Brandstrom, I still feel like they have better options. DPD for one.
Yeah, I was gonna say right now to kind of take the spotlight and not shine it too hard on Noah Juulsen to put a more positive spin on it. Elias Pettersson should be playing. He should be in the top 6. I think he's good enough to do it. I think he is arguably already one of their 6 best defensemen, just out of the few games I've seen of him. I think he's still got to work on being more physical at the NHL level like he is at the AHL, but even just the reads he makes, his ability to skate the puck in off his offhand, he looks so much more confident and as a puck mover than just about any of the other defensemen not named Quinn Hughes. He is clearly ready to play more and to play at this level. Like there is no scenario where he should be sent back down, and there's no scenario where I would say that he should be playing behind a Noah Juulsen in the depth chart, or a Vinny Desharnais, or even really a Derek Forbort. If we're being totally honest here, I think he's good enough to be in that top 6 already, night after night, based on where the Canucks defense has been at.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really liked what AP40 has brought, and I just don't see why they don't give these kids a bigger leash. I understand that they're young. I understand they might not be ready for a full-time role, but 2 wins in a row for DPD, and he didn't look out of place in either one, does beg the question of why he then finds himself out of the lineup for this game and for the road trip. So we'll see what lineups they continue to do. I mean, they got the win tonight, so I definitely can't complain too much, but still some head-scratching decisions in my mind from Tocchet. Why do you think Tocchet gets praised to Juulsen? I think it's because he just is very much a systems guy. I think that he can't really play the sport of ice hockey that well by himself, but he plays the system as Tocchet likes it, and he's a penalty-killing guy. And so because of that, he likes him. I think he at least knows what he's getting out of Noah Juulsen. But I'd rather, what you're getting is bad. So put in someone else. It's not that hard. You know what you're getting, but you're not getting very good hockey. I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't seem that hard to me.
Yeah, I think I do understand, like, both sides of, you can't, some people are already fully on the fire Tocchet train. Some people are fully on the, it's entirely the player's fault side. I think like many things in life, the answer lies somewhere in the middle. I think you can argue the players haven't been good enough, but I also think you can argue that Rick Tocchet should know better than to put Noah Juulsen in every night. I don't think that is. I think I can say that without saying that they should fire him right now. I think that that's just something he should be doing, is not playing Noah Juulsen. Especially there's so many plays where he makes where, as a goaltender, I'm baffled, and if he was my defensive partner, I'd be a lot less kind about some of the decision making made there, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. The amount of chances that are surrendered when he's on the ice is numerous. I mean, of course, that first goal was his pairing. Granted, that one was more Carson Soucy's fault than Noah Juleson, but there was also multiple other great chances in front that went straight through where Juleson should be marking. Yeah, I don't know. I want to see him out of the lineup. I think that maybe the Canucks should have an assistant coach whose sole job is to just, after Rick Talk is done coaching, look at the lineups for the day and just say, hey man, can we substitute in these players for these players? Because sometimes the question, or the decision making is questionable. I have mostly like the forwards. Linus Karlsson, I didn't think I'd like seeing him on the first line, but hey, goal. Good for him. I think Max Sasson's played some quality hockey. Again, maybe not a super inspiring NHLer. The other guy, I'm interested to see because he got called up to the NHL team but did not play tonight, was Aatu Räty.
Aatu Räty, another player where it's kind of hard to place what his ceiling is. I think he's got something. He's played very well every time he's at the AHL level. He seems to play really, really well, but it just hasn't clicked at the NHL level yet. It might just be that he doesn't necessarily get the same leash as other players do, certainly. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing Aatu Räty get a few reps in. I think I've seen some players who can't handle that spot as well as he can, certainly.
Yeah. I've liked what he's brought as well. He has been a really interesting player to kind of track the career of because, of course, in his draft -1 year, he was touted as a potential top 5 draft pick. He was supposed to go super high in the draft, and he had a bad draft year. Fell all the way to the second round. This is still not a super low pick. And then has kind of bounced around. It was a bit of an NHL regular over in the Islanders, but couldn't crack the roster 100% of the time. Sent here to Vancouver, similar thing. But if he can kind of turn himself into a really high face-off percentage winning guy, I'd like to see him in the lineup. And that'll be my final note here. Is the Canucks do need some help in the face-off dot. 33% tonight. 33%. That is not good.
No, you need to be much better than that. I mean, that's about their specialty guys are supposed to be guys like Suter, and Bluger as well. They just can't win those faceoffs. Especially, possession is so much of this game. You can't be losing those faceoff draws that often.
No, not when you're as possession-based team as the Canucks. However, at the same time, despite all the mistakes tonight, Vancouver were able to pull out a victory using that turtle hockey, we'll call it. So good job for the Canucks. 3-1 victory, final score, and that is where we shall end it. So thank you all for tuning in. We really appreciate the support throughout the stream. Thank you very much to Lachlan Irvin for joining me on today's stream. You can catch him at Lach, L-A-C-H, in the crease on social medias for many different good content, including goaltender and funny. Those are the two things I know you for.
Many different good content and funny. I'm going to put that in my...
Many different good content and funny. So yeah, go check out Lachlan on socials, and thank you very much for tuning in. Next game will be on December 31st, 5 p.m. local time, Pacific time, against the Dallas Stars. That'll be a fun one, and let me check who's with you on that one. I believe it is going to be Kaja. But let me just double check before we run out of here. It will be Kaja as well as guest Alex Rickman. So do check out that one. Again, December 31st, 5 p.m. against the Stars. For tonight, I have been Zach Clarke. He's been Lachlan Irvin. Thank you all so much for tuning in and have a wonderful night.